Do you support giving the go-ahead to new oil fields if they're subject to a stringent climate compatibility test?
Well, if they're subject to a stringent climate compatibility test and the outcome of that test says that they are compatible with our climate objectives, then that is one thing, but that is not what is happening. As far as I can see it in terms of UK decision making. Oil and gas is a big part of our current energy mix. You can't turn off oil and gas overnight. It also is a significant employer of people in Scotland and contributes significantly to our economy. So we need to move away from fossil fuels. Every country in the world says that and knows that. We need to do it as quickly as possible, but we need to do it in a proper, planned way with justice at its heart. We need to invest more, as the Scottish Government is doing, in renewable alternatives where Scotland has such vast potential.
But it might come as news to some supporters that you do support new oil fields if they pass a climate test that you're happy with, because just 11 months ago you said, I do not think we can continue to give the go-ahead to new oil fields.
Everything I've said has been about the climate compatibility. Now, what I said, and I think probably what you're quoting there, is I am very sceptical about the ability of new exploration to meet such a robust climate compatibility test. I have specifically, and everything I've said bears this out, in terms of new licenses, there is a climate compatibility checkpoint process. I don't think it is robust enough, but where we're talking about, like Campbell was, an oil field that already has a licence granted, I think in that case 20 years ago, and is going for development consent, there's no compatibility test at that point, and there should be. So I'm sceptical in this world when, climate change is as serious as it is, whether these things can meet climate compatibility. But if you don't even do these exercises, you can never know that.
Even that position, though, puts you at odds with the international scientific consensus that says no new oil fields. But you mentioned the transition to a renewable economy. You mentioned jobs. Do you know what your record is on that? Because the SNP in 2010 promised 130,000 direct green new jobs. Do you think you delivered that promise, First Minister?
No, I don't think we've delivered that in the way we want to. There's various reasons for that. There's also, I'm not trying to negate your central point here, but there are different ways of measuring what are green jobs, and I don't think there's any sort of consensus-based way of doing that. So you'll get different estimates for green jobs. What we do know is that we have seen.
With respect, you said that you're talking about the statistics. They are from the ONS, and they do show that there were fewer direct green jobs in Scotland in 2020 than in 2014. So actually, you went backwards.
Okay, I probably have seen these figures, but I don't have these figures at the top of my mind.
But the point
right
is,
now.
You've had an opportunity. You've had 15 years in government. You promised 130,000 new green jobs, and you haven't delivered them. So why on earth should anyone believe a word you say now?
Let me try and I'm genuinely trying to get into a proper sort of engagement on this issue, because I think it's an important issue. I've been really candid in the past. If you take the debates around BIFAB, for example, that we have been very successful in terms of renewable energy generation. What we've not been as good as we should have been, and as we need to be in the future, is the supply chain and economic benefits of that. So if you take, what are we doing now? So you take ScotWind, for example, which is, the potential go ahead to 28 gigawatts of offshore wind. Context, that's about double our current installed capacity of renewables. We have with the developers there. Wait, let me finish this point.
Sorry, First Minister, but that figure is in dispute, that 25 gigawatts, because Scottish government documents suggest you're more around the 10 gigawatt mark.
No, it's not in dispute. So let me take you through that. Our planning assumption going into the ScotWind auction was 10 gigawatts. What came out of the ScotWind auction, much to our surprise, was the go-ahead potentially for up to 25 gigawatts. There's since been a supplemental round by Crown Estates, which has taken that up to 28 gigawatts. What will eventually be given planning consent will, you're right, be somewhere between 10 and 28. I hope it's closer to 28, but that depends on the processes.
We have to move on, I'm afraid.
I said, we're
short of time. Unless they can give me more, First Minister, I have to ask you about something else.
But let me answer your question about what are we doing to secure the economic benefit.
4 minutes left.
Yeah, but you asked me the question. Let me answer the question. So in ScotWind, we have learning from things in the past. All of the developers bidding for ScotWind licences had to do a supply chain development statement. But this is about jobs. We've got a collaborative framework, so we are working already with developers to ensure not just the energy potential from that, but that feeds through into jobs and economic development.
Okay, let me ask you about Vladimir Putin, because he has threatened nuclear warfare, Vladimir Putin, is it still your position? Do you still want to scrap Trident, the UK's nuclear deterrence?
Yes, I believe the whole world should move away from nuclear weapons. I believe the situation we are in, where somebody like Vladimir Putin, firstly, the situation we are in is entirely 100% the fault of Vladimir Putin. But the fact that anybody can threaten nuclear warfare is an argument against nuclear weapons, not an argument for them. I want to see Scotland safely and responsibly move away from Trident. Whether Trident would continue or not would be it's a UK government decision, but I don't want to see Trident based in Scotland.
Do you not think that NATO's nuclear deterrence is effective at present?
I believe we need to move away from a world that has nuclear weapons. And
well, can you imagine though what Vladimir Putin would be doing right now?
Well, if we move away
a
from a world
deterrence?
with nuclear weapons, I don't want anybody to have nuclear weapons.
You can't persuade Vladimir Putin to give them up, can you?
This is about Scotland. Let's remember the vast majority, I think there's 8 countries in the world out of 200 countries have nuclear weapons. It is the norm not to have nuclear weapons based on your own soil. Now, it's not up to me, and wouldn't be up to me or my successor in an independent Scotland to decide whether Trident was scrapped or not. That would be a UK government decision. It would be for Scottish governments to decide whether Trident was located in Scotland, and the position, very strong position of my party, is that it shouldn't be.
Okay, let's move on to the financial situation, because we came very close recently to a financial crisis, and it was only because the Bank of England stepped in that people's pensions were saved in effect. What you're proposing in an independent Scotland is to informally use sterling, to have no lender of last resort there, to step in and intervene and save people's pensions, mortgages and savings.
I'm going to come on to the substance of that question, but firstly, I would hope governments in an independent Scotland wouldn't bring pension funds to the point of collapse like the UK government did 2 weeks ago. So let's take that first point. That is the fault of a UK government that chose to borrow large amounts of money to give tax cuts to the very richest in society. So bringing pension funds to the verge of collapse is not an inevitability. It was the result of choices made by a UK government that Scotland didn't vote for. On to the substance of your question, I, in the next couple of weeks, will publish a paper, the latest in our series of papers, making the case for independence, looking at the economics of independence. Part of that will be currency and the financial institutions we would have. So in terms of your questions about lender of last resort and etc., we would, the minute Scotland chose to become independent, start to create a Scottish central bank, which, while we were still using the pound sterling, would have lender of last resort functions for the financial services industry. Yes, monetary policy would still be governed by the Bank of England. Ultimately, we would be seeking to move to a Scottish pound where the Scottish Central Bank would take on those wider functions.
And that prospectus for independence, so far what we've seen has been based on saying, look at these other small independent nations, look at their policies and we can do something similar. But you can't name, can you, a single advanced economy, successful independent country that's doing anything like what you're proposing to do in surrendering monetary policy, using sterling informally, having no lender of last resort to step in and save people's pensions.
Well, one of the things the paper will do is look at the variety of currency arrangements that are around the world. But
could you name one of them that's doing something even remotely like what you're proposing?
To engage, we're talking about taking a careful managed process to a Scottish currency. Now, one of the many lessons of the last couple of weeks that perhaps other people need to learn more than I do is the need to be responsible and careful in these things, and the need to retain financial confidence in your fiscal and monetary policy. So it's not, and I don't want to get too far into the detail because we'll set this out in the paper I'm talking about, but you're characterising my position in a way that is not accurate.
First Minister, you were the person who said these are the international precedents for all these other things to do with independence. When it comes to the currency, there is no country that you can point to that's doing anything remotely like what you're doing.
You're characterising that my policy is the way you've characterised it. My policy is to move to a Scottish currency.
It's to informally use sterling. You're not telling me you're scrapping that, are you? That would be big news.
To informally use sterling as we move carefully to a Scottish currency.
Can you name another country that does anything like that, other than Panama and Montenegro?
Look, the pound is an internationally traded currency. It's Scotland's currency. But if what you were describing was the end point of the position, you might have a point here. We are taking a phased approach to Scottish currency. We will set out the detail of that phasing,
even in an interim
the conditions that are. But if you could snap your fingers and do all of these things, it would be much better. You've got to do it carefully in a responsible way, and that's what we will do. The alternative, of course, is accepting that we are at the mercy of decisions taken by governments we don't vote for that wreak economic and financial havoc on people. Independence is about taking control of these things. Independence is not some untried and untested concept. 200 or so countries across the world successfully managed to do it, and there is absolutely no reason why Scotland couldn't do so as well.
Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister, thank you very much.